Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and my guest today is Dr. Natalie Digate Muth. Natalie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I am excited to have you on the show to talk about something that I know is an issue for a lot of parents, and that is picky eaters. And Natalie is an expert on the subject, so let me just introduce you to everyone really quick. She is a dual board certified pediatrician and registered dietitian, which is awesome. You don't always hear both of those together. So I love it that you're both on the pediatrician end and the registered dietitian. And most importantly, she is a mom. She's the author of 4 books, including the parenting books, Eat Your Vegetables and Other Mistakes Parents Make, Redefining How to Raise Healthy Eaters. I'm really excited to talk about that title. It's just so intriguing to me. And also the author of Picky Eater Project, 6 Weeks to Happier, Healthier Family Meal Times. She loves helping parents navigate through the fun and the challenges of raising healthy, active kids. So you guys can see why I am excited to talk to her today. So Natalie, to start off, will you fill us in a little bit? I love your bio that tells us, about your books and about your professional work, but tell us a little bit more about you and your family and what got you interested in health and nutrition for kids.
Sure. Well, my interest in health and nutrition for kids kind of started like it does for many pediatricians and others who are interested in nutrition activities as professionals with my own childhood. And I wasn't the healthiest kid and I didn't eat the healthiest way. But over time, I gained new skills and had new interests and really was able to incorporate better nutrition activity into my own life, which got me really interested in being able to help do that for others. And working with children and families is just extremely rewarding and very fun. And it's also a great opportunity to start when kids are really young, and there's lots of opportunities to shape kind of how they approach being healthy and how they approach food and activity. And I really enjoy working kind of on that family level. And I have 2 young kids of my own. One of them who tends to have a little bit or had a little bit more picky eating preferences, and the other one not so much. So it's been kind of a neat experience also kind of living it and practicing some of the strategies that we know about from research and kind of the professional end of things, but then really applying it to real life.
Yes, that's so interesting because as you can learn everything from a book and find out all this great information. But then when you have a child in your home, you get to really, that's the lab, right? That's the true lab setting, is putting that all into practice at home. And so I'm sure that just makes you all the more well-rounded and better able to speak on the subject as you have a child who you're able to practice this with.
For sure. And I love how you called it the lab, because that's a lot of what the conversations I have with parents and families and the kids even is, it's kind of an experiment, trying something new. It's kind of like a test, and let's see how it tastes the first try and rate it. And as an experiment, maybe we'll try it again. And kids, you find with kids that taking that approach it's a living lab, it's experimenting. We don't know what the outcome will be. Can make it more fun and get kids more engaged in the process, which at the end of the day gives you better results too.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great thought right off the bat, because anything that's fun is, where you get the engagement from the kids. Before we move on and talk more about picky eating, I just wanted to, as I was doing my research, like I like to do on all our guests that we're having on the calls, I read the most beautiful article that you had written about your son, Teddy. And I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about him.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for asking about Teddy. So like so many families and parents experience, and sometimes in public ways and talk about it, and sometimes in private ways, we had a loss for Teddy. So Teddy was our first child, and he didn't make it. So when I was in my medical school training, I was pregnant with him, and he ended up being stillborn, which, as you can imagine, and some listeners probably know themselves, quite a traumatic and kind of devastating experience. And not to be a downer from the beginning of the call, but really we keep Teddy in our hearts, as any parent does with the child, whether they're with them or not. And because of Teddy, it's been really great because my husband and I and our children, Thomas and Mariella, have been able to have a foundation in his memory, his name, to really help kids in the area and to do more in our community and help to share our experiences, our resources with nonprofits and other groups nearby who really are working hard to help kids to be healthy. So Teddy kind of was the inspiration for a lot of things that we do now, and it's been really cool to have my kids, who are my living children, to talk about Teddy and to ask about Teddy, and every year on his birthday, we are able to celebrate and to give back to our community.
I think that's so sweet. And, one thing that you said in that article that I read was that you love to talk about Teddy. And I think that made me brave enough to ask, because I think a lot of times we feel like, oh, well, I don't know. Should I bring that up? And I love that you just put it out there like, yeah, I'm okay to talk about him and I want to talk about him. And so I love that. And I think that that's really powerful in the healing of it. And then also, for parents who are going through that, to see you on the other end all these years later, that he is still a part of your family, or his younger siblings even. I actually, I have one sister that was stillborn. My mom was pregnant with twins when I was 13, and neither of them made it. And one was stillborn and one lived for just a couple days. And even though, we don't know them very well, they are a part of our family. And so I think that that is really awesome that you are willing to talk about him and to share that, and that you celebrate his birthday, and that he leads you guys on to doing good things. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really special and a neat part of your family.
For sure. And thank you for feeling comfortable to ask about it, because as you mentioned, a lot of times, people don't know what to say or don't know how to have that conversation, but you find out in having the conversation how many other people have gone through something similar, as you mentioned with your sisters. And there really is a community out there that people may not otherwise know about without having those conversations. So for others who may be listening, who've experienced loss and maybe haven't felt like there's others who have had a similar experience, there's a lot of us. And sometimes it's just having the conversation to start that can be really eye-opening and very healing too.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. I love it. Now, today we are going to talk about picky eaters. And I wanted to start off with an email that I got from a listener. And I know you're going to have some great thoughts for her. So this is what she says. I guess I have a real life scenario where my child would rather starve than eat. I tell her if she doesn't eat, then she will get nothing until the next meal. So for a few days, she would go from breakfast to dinner and not eat lunch or any snacks, and she would be grumpy and sometimes fall asleep because she was so weak, but she is so stubborn. And then there's 3 exclamation marks. Also, if I give her an option of something she likes and she has to try some other food, she will just try a bite of the new food and fill up on the food she likes. So I desperately need help. I feel like my kids are always sick because of their diet. So let's start there. When you are in the trenches and you've got these picky kids and you feel like nothing's working, what can you do?
Yeah. Your reader's experience is very common. And I think it helps to make clear something that I think is a really important part of this whole journey with feeding children, is that there's as much psychology around it as there is nutrition around it. And it's the balance of working with the psyche of a child at whatever age and stage they may be at, and also the parent's investment and having a feeling of a responsibility and desire to really help their child to be a healthy eater and eat things in a balanced way. And there's also lots of ways to approach this. And a lot of it depends on how a parent, the personality of the parent and the child, and the relationship that the parent and the child have. So for instance, what your listener alluded to. I think she alluded to lots of different things actually that come up when we're offering tips on dealing with picky eaters. So one of them is to not cater to the pickiness, or to not have a separate meal for the child who refuses to eat the foods that you want them to eat. And I think your listener has alluded to the fact that she's done that because she's making sure to have the meal, and she's said, okay, if you don't eat this, then that's okay, but I'm not going to be giving you something else to eat. And her child has gone along with that to the extent of like, who's going to, like, a little bit of playing chicken, right? And who's going to give in to this first. And usually it's the parent who breaks, so to speak, before the child does. And then it's kind of like starting over again. So the second thing that your listener alluded to that we might recommend in this kind of a situation is, okay, have a family meal together, but include at least one thing that you know your child likes. So that way, you know, they're going to eat something, but they're also seeing what it looks like to have a balanced meal, and kind of being able to model a little bit about what the healthy eating looks like, but the kid has something that they like to eat. And so your listener has done that and said, okay, but she just eats what she likes, and she'll maybe just try a bite of the other things. And I actually think the one thing to add to your reader to kind of respond is, what about taking a positive approach to the fact that she was willing to try the bite of the other thing? Because it can take, as I mentioned in the very beginning about it, it can be an experiment and kind of a little bit of trial and error. It can take 20 tries of something to like something that was previously rejected. So the fact that the child is even willing to try it, our expectation shouldn't necessarily be that she's going to love it and eat it up. But it might be that she's willing to play along in the experiment of seeing if she might come along to liking it by giving it a try. And another way that can help kids to give it a try without being into a battle of the wills and parents kind of nagging or feeling like they have to pressure the child to eat is to get the kid involved in helping to pick stuff out. So for example, okay, we're going to have dinner together this week, as a family 4 times. Help me pick out what meals we should have for those 4 times. Help me make sure that we have, the balance. So we need to have some kind of a whole grain, some kind of a protein, some kind of a vegetable, or 2 vegetables or a fruit at that meal. And let's work together and come up with what it's going to be. And if the child feels a sense of control, then there's an increased likelihood that they're going to eat it. But then to the next level, depending on how old the child is, and you can tailor it to their age and development, is really getting the kid involved and helping to prepare the food. Now, busy parents can be like, I can't do that every day. We don't have time. And that's okay. Right. But even if it's sometimes, if parents think of this as a process, so it's not going to change overnight. But if we're able to engage the kids in the process of trying to expand the types of foods that are okay, and trying to train the taste buds to try new things, then eventually the kids come around. A lot of times parents don't believe this because it doesn't happen overnight, but I assure you, the kids will come around if the parents are consistent in the process of one family, one meal. Let's eat meals together. Let's offer balanced foods, but let's involve the kids in trying to help us pick what some of those foods might be. Don't pressure the kids to eat. Have the food to be there, maybe nudges, but not like demanding you got to eat your vegetables or you have to try this thing. And when we're not looking, the kids try it. And if they tried enough times, they eventually can come around to it. Or if they're hungry enough, they're eventually going to eat. So it's about removing some of the other options that they may be the more preferred foods for them, kind of getting those out of the house, or those are not options. And then the kids can be trained, and kind of over time, they come around to eating more of the foods that you want them to be eating.
Okay, so much good stuff in there. So on a practical level, when you're saying that, you're modeling healthy eating and you're having this balanced meal out at the table, do you just leave it on the table, or you're dishing it up for your kids and it's actually on their plate where they can see it? Logistically, how does that work?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So depending on how old the kid is, and kind of what your main concerns are around, is it picky eating? Is it the kid doesn't eat enough? Does the kid eat too much? We usually recommend letting kids decide like the portion size, because we tend to think they need to eat a lot more than they actually need. But if you're dealing with the really pickiness side of it, and so your kid is not going to dish up anything that you all have offered, then the practical nature of it can be, okay, parents putting a small amount of the balanced meal on the child's plate. So it's in front of them. They're seeing it. They're maybe they're smelling it just because they're close to it. But then letting the kid decide of what food is on their plate, what they're going to eat, and how much of it they're going to eat.
Okay. That makes sense. That
if I could add one more thing to that too.
Yeah.
And then the parents doing the same thing. Okay. So the parents having the balance on their plate, the parents being willing to try things that maybe they don't think that they like, or maybe are a little unfamiliar, and the parents having a positive attitude around the food. So for instance, if you have a little kid, like say a 2 or 3 year old, who is having a really hard time trying the broccoli, and then a parent is at the table who's like, I hate broccoli, or eats the broccoli and makes a bad face. Okay, well, that's very powerful, and that's going to kind of sabotage the effort. So you want to make sure that the adults and the other members of the family are kind of like on the same page with this, that we're going to be modeling how we want this to look, because the kids are watching us. Even if we don't think that they're paying attention, they're watching us, and our actions are more powerful really than the words that we say.
Yes, definitely. My kids are not too picky. In fact, I have one girl and 4 boys, and my girl not so much, but all my boys are just eaters. They will just eat and eat. They love to eat. And anyway, and they have lots of energy, and they apparently need all that food. But what I was going to say about that is, I am a big green smoothie drinker. I have lots of green smoothies, and I don't necessarily make them for my kids. I make them smoothies once a week on Friday. That's our breakfast. But I have my own mom green smoothie. It's loaded with greens. And interestingly, that example part you were talking about, they ask for it sometimes. They'll say, can I have some of your smoothie? And I'm like, oh, well, that was mine, but okay. I'm happy to share. But it's interesting because that isn't necessarily happening at dinner. They're not saying, oh, can I have vegetables? But they're seeing this. They're seeing, oh, mom is drinking this because she likes it, obviously. She's drinking it all the time. And so they are noticing that, and they're asking for it. So I think that's interesting. And it speaks to something that clearly I need to learn about, which is the title of your book is Eat Your Vegetables and Other Mistakes Parents Make, right? So when I read that, I thought, shoot, I am making that mistake, because I'm always saying that at dinner, eat your vegetables, put some vegetables on your plate. Do you want me to dish it up because you didn't get enough? All this kind of stuff that probably parents are not supposed to say. So what, when we have them on their plate, I can see if a kid's super picky, like this listener that we read about, you're working at the beginning to get it on their plate. But at that point, are we just hoping they're going to eat it at that point? Or what is the next step?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So one is the idea about the vegetables is the more we push it on kids, and the more invested we are that they eat it, the more that kids react. It's getting back to the whole psychology thing of being like, oh, if they're pushing it this hard and it's so important to them that I try this, it must be really gross. Like, this is not something that I would just like choose to do, because they're like, so, pushing it and nudging and kind of demanding it. So what happens, and what studies have shown to happens, is the more we're pushing it and forcing it on kids, the more they have this idea of like, if they're pushing it that hard, it must be bad. I don't like it. And at the end of the day, they like it less. And I think a lot of adults can probably think about a situation in our own childhoods where maybe we were forced to eat something that we really didn't want to eat or thought was kind of gross. And then we were made to eat it, and then we like don't like it at all now, and like we refuse to try it still. So if your goal is that at the end of the day your kids grow up to be healthy eaters and they are willing and choose to eat vegetables and fruits and eat in a balanced way, then the process that we take to help them to get to that point is to try to create meal times that are enjoyable, trying to not be pressuring too much, but also having the opportunity to offer these foods and offer these tastes and things like that repeatedly over time, and model what it looks like to be healthy, because the kids are watching, as I mentioned, but I'm saying it again, like they are watching what we're doing. The studies support this, that kids take after their parents when it comes to eating habits. They take after their parents when it comes to physical activity. So if we're doing it, then they're going to eventually be doing it too. Then to just add one more point about the smoothies too, because a lot of parents are, give their kids the green smoothies, and it's a way of making sure that you've got the nutrients and they're actually eating some vegetables, and the kids are more willing oftentimes to eat that than they are to actually, choose spinach salad or something like that. So that can be a way to kind of get the vegetables in. But I just encourage parents to make sure it's not your only way that you're doing it, because the way to get the kids to actually choose those vegetables later and to like them is to actually have to experience the taste of them, like alone, or, mix with a couple of things where you can still taste the taste of the spinach or the broccoli, and the texture. And it's that repeated exposures to the taste and the texture that helps a child eventually come around to being like, oh yeah, I kind of like this. And for parents who don't believe me, you might think about the first time that you tried like unsweetened tea, or the first time that you drank coffee, or, the first time that you drank beer, and you might have been like, whoa, that's really bitter. I don't really care for that. But then as you have it more often, you actually start to like it more. And then sometimes you even start to like it a lot and you choose to have it.
Right. So just getting the palate used to these different flavors. So it sounds like there's a letting go process.
That's a great way to say it.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you have to let go of the outcome.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. It's invest in the process and just trust in the outcome. Worry about that later. You can as a parent, you can only control what you can control. And there's two things, especially, toddlers age is when a lot of parents experience pickiness kind of for the first time, or it can be the most stressful. And if you think about a toddler's life, like there's really two things that they can control. They can control whether or not they're going to get potty trained and use the potty or not, or use the diaper. And they can control whether they're going to put something in their mouth or not. And when you're a toddler and you're trying to test limits and exert your control, and those are the only two things you can control, and you see how much it gets on your parents' nerves when you don't do what they want you to do, you're just going to be a little defiant and you're going to refuse it more. And then it gets into this big battle, and it's hugely stressful for everyone. If parents can just let that go and take an approach where you have the situation where you control, we call it shared responsibility. Parents control the food that's available, when it's available, what it is, kind of where the kids eat it, and then let the kid control of what you offer them, what they're going to eat, and how much of it. And you'll be really surprised that eventually, well, one, the kids actually do a pretty good job of regulating their intake, especially if you're only having like real foods available, not a lot of processed stuff. But two, they eventually come around to trying things as the parent comes around to caring less, or making it seem like they care less, so that it's not a power struggle. It's more of kind of an exploration and kind of fun.
Well, this sounds so fun. It sounds so much more fun than what I'm doing. Like, eat your vegetables, that's not fun at all. And so I love that this takes the power struggle out of it. Now, how soon can we expect to see the kids turn around? I mean, are we talking weeks, months, years, before they are willing to try something?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of it, not to not answer it, but a lot of it really does depend on the child, and also depends on the approach ultimately that a parent takes in kind of implementing it, because different parents have a different tolerance for how long they're okay with, watching their child not eat certain things for a period of time. But some kids, it's quick, and some kids, it's a process over time. But if you remember to invest in the process and also in what you can control. So parents can control that there's got to be family meal times. Parents can control what food is on the table. Parents can control not giving in or catering to like special meals, although you can incorporate a child's preference into the family meal that everyone else eats. And then parents can kind of control how much fun happens around things. Like you could talk to the child and say like, hey, will you help me make this? Or like I said before, like involving kids in preparing things or choosing things. And they tend to come around to things more quickly. And then eventually, will like things. And I just want to share one story because I feel like it was one of my greatest, well, it was one of, not mine, I guess, but one of the greatest successes around this model and kind of this approach of training your taste buds. And I say that a lot. Like instead of saying to a kid, eat your vegetables, you might say to a kid, all right, well, I'm training my taste buds. I didn't really know if I would like this, but I'm trying it. And, if there's another child at the table who's more open, you're like, yeah, she's training her taste buds. But the story is, we made like this, I made this like seafood pasta stew kind of a thing, a little bit unusual for the family. And for me, I love seafood stuff, but everybody else was like, oh, okay, we'll try this. But my husband was like, wow, I really like that. I think I trained my taste buds to like this fish more. And I was like, awesome. My husband's talking about training his taste buds. Like the lingo has caught on and it's just part of what we do. So I say,
That's
if you can like change your approach to being pressuring and being really invested and like demanding that kids eat something and just more of like, it's an experiment. We're all in this together. We're just training our taste buds to like new things. And have fun with it and see, for your own family, how it tends to work out. But, I've seen a lot of success with it.
Okay. I see how you could. And I just love this kind of laid back approach. It's interesting because that's my style of parenting. I love for my kids to go outside and play. And I'm not the one to, be watching everything they do while they play. And I try to let them be kids and do their thing. And yet somehow there's a disconnect at the dinner table because I'm there and I'm watching and I care a lot about health and I am, like eat your vegetables, cramming them down their throats. And so this is very good for me to hear. It takes the pressure off as parents and we can trust, we can trust I love this. I wrote down this quote, invest in the process, trust in the outcome. I think that is so good. We set the foundation, we set the table, as it were, and we trust in the outcome. So any final thoughts for us on healthy eating, on family meals, on anything you want to share?
I think that most of the main points that I like to make are the things that I have conversations with families in the office all the time. I think that they came out in the conversation so far, but just two things to kind of, I guess, reiterate or really highlight. So I think I've, beaten that it takes 15 to 20 tries to like something and training the taste buds to death. So I think everybody got that. And then the family meals, I've been asked before, like, okay, if there was one thing that you would say to parents and families about being healthy and their nutrition and just overall, raising well-adjusted, happy kids, what would it be? And it's eating meals together. Eat dinners together as often as possible. We have an abundance of research that shows that kids who eat meals with their family not only are healthier eaters, they're more likely to be at a healthy weight, but as they become teenagers, they're more well-adjusted, they get into less trouble, they're more successful academically. Like if there's only one thing that you can really do to invest in your child's health and nutrition, it's to try to make a priority to eat dinner together. The research says at least 3 times a week, but really as many times a week as logistically possible, the better. And if you do that, the other stuff is going to fall into place.
I love it. That is huge. Family meal time is such a big deal. So I'm so glad that you are are bringing that out because that's huge. And like you said, that's just going to lead to all these good things, including healthy eating, less picky eaters, and healthy, happy kids. So, Natalie, thank you so much for being on the show. I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I feel like I can have a deep sigh of relief here. We're going to go have a great dinner.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I look forward to hearing how it goes with the laid back approach to getting the kids to eat their vegetables.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode and being a part of Moms Who Know. I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. I wanted to let you know about some resources on the website. You're going to want to go to momswhoknowpodcast.com and go to free resources. I've recently added a brand new, it's a big list of activities to add to your morning routine. So if morning routine is something that you're working on, you'll want to go there. You'll see a few other resources there as well. So go check it out and we'll see you next week.